In a world where kingdoms fall and stars still remember names, this song was forged from magic memory and the dream that refused to die. Welcome to a tale where wonder still breathes. This is the story, the bookstore that only opens for love, a poetic fantasy romance for my Yongsun created by Suspa Ampara. If this tale stirred something in you, a memory, a dream, or a truth, our Ko-fi, Amazon, and Patreon links are in the description. Support helps us keep writing for you and the ones you hold dear. In a room that only existed when hearts were breaking quietly, Yongsun stood beneath a glass dome painted with stars and spoke to a small circle of strangers. The chairs were mismatched, some velvet, some wicker, some carved from cherry wood, but each creaked with the weight of someone looking for someone. There was a woman who had memorized the smell of her daughter's hair, a man who had danced with a stranger at the train station and never saw her again, a girl who carried a letter addressed to someone who didn't exist yet. Yongsun faced them with the calm of moonlight slipping under a door. She wore a coat the color of moth wings, and her hair was tied with a ribbon older than some countries. In one hand, she held a book that didn't have a title. In the other, she cradled silence like it was a living thing. When people say they're lost, she said, what they mean is that they misplaced someone. Her voice was soft, but it echoed across bookshelves, threading itself between the spines. You've all come here thinking this place is a map, but it's not, it's a mirror. She walked among them slowly, her feet making no sound on the wooden floor. You want to know how to find the person you're searching for, she asked, lifting her gaze. Then you must first remember where you first or last left them. The girl with the letter blinked. But what if I haven't met them yet? Yongsun paused and said, then look for the places where you feel seen. Look for the hour of the day when you feel most alive. That's usually where they'll be waiting. Someone asked, and what if we're wrong? She smiled then, small, tired, and beautiful. Then the universe will correct you, the way it does, by breaking your heart exactly where it needs to be opened. The wind rustled the pages of an open book. Somewhere upstairs, a record player cracked but didn't start. Some of you will live here and find what you came for. Some of you won't, but all of you, she said gently, will begin again. She bowed, a gesture older than language, and the lights dimmed. One by one, her students left through doors that led to places not found on maps. A train stopped, and that didn't exist yesterday, a forest that smelled like someone's childhood, a city that had waited patiently for their return. And when the last chair was empty, and the scent of hope still lingered in the air like perfume, Yongsun stood alone once more, brushing invisible dust from her sleeves, already halfway into the next lesson no one had asked for. She didn't know it yet, but her next student would not be coming to find someone, he would be coming to find her. There are places in the world that don't wait for you to find them. They bloom like ghost flowers, visible only when your heart fractures in the right pattern. One such place sat quietly between a rusted laundromat and a bakery that hadn't smelled like sugar in years. The doorway was crooked, framed in ivy and dusted with moonlight, and above it swayed a lamp that burned only for those carrying a question too secret to ask aloud. And when Jess first stepped through that door, he didn't hear a bell, he felt it. A hush in his ribcage, like the air had just held its breath for him. Inside was a bookstore, and yet it wasn't. The scent was that of late spring and stories long unread. A mix of ink and old rose petals, cedar wood and memory. Sunlight filtered through stained glass skylights, painting arabesque across the wooden floor of books that were arranged like a galaxy. Constellations of longing and laughter, wonder and grief. Some hummed faintly, others breathed, literally breathed, inhaling dust and sighing when opened. At the center of it all stood a woman with her sleeves rolled and her hair bound by an old ribbon of crimson silk. She didn't look up immediately. She was painting letters into the air with a brush dipped in tea instead of ink. Letters that floated and glimmered briefly before disappearing into the rafters. She looked like half a dream, precise, quiet, and unknowable. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "I found the door," Jess answered, his voice gentler than the step he had taken inside. "No," she corrected, brushing her fingers over the spine of a poetry book that leaned like a drunkard. "The door found you." Her name was Yongsun, though her students often called her teacher or dreamweaver or Miss Sunlight. This wasn't just a bookstore. It was a school for the aching, a refuge for those who were looking not for direction but for someone, a brother gone with the tide, a best friend who faded out of childhood like smoke, a lover glimpsed only once on a train but never forgotten, the lost, the might-have-beens, the almost. And Yongsun helped them find their way back. There had been many before Jess. There was Rico, who lost her husband to war and wandered the streets clutching a photograph. Yongsun taught her how to find him again, not as he was, but in the eyes of his brother, who had never confessed he loved her too. And then there was Nick, who had run from his past until the wind blew open the bookstore's door and he stumbled inside. Yongsun guided him to a town 2 train stops away, where the man who had once carved birds for him waited with trembling hands in a secret too long buried. There was a little girl named Anna who couldn't speak but drew the face of a woman in every notebook. Yongsun found her mother in an alley full of wind chimes, playing a melody only Anna could recognize. Each story ended with someone found, but Yongsun always remained behind, watching them walk through the door with arms full of books, memories or promises, while she returned to her empty ledger. She told herself she was fulfilled. She told herself she had chosen this life. But on quiet nights, when the books stopped whispering and the stars dimmed behind cloudy glass windows, she played a little music box beside her pillow, one that never played the same song twice, and wondered if anyone would come for her. And then Jess came. And he stayed. He shouldn't have, but he did. He learned her lessons, he studied the books, sat through her riddles and strange meditations and storytelling exercises that began with fireflies and ended with tears. And slowly, achingly slowly, Yongsun began to notice things, like how the old phonograph on the counter only played when Jess smiled, how the lights flickered slightly when he read aloud, how the dream shelf, a place where students wrote their name of the person they sought, glowed with unreadable gold when Jess touched it. One night he stayed late, tracing the shape of a book that hadn't been written yet. "Do you believe this place is real?" he asked. Yongsun replied that "I believe in what it does," she said. He looked up at her like it was a lighthouse made of ink and sorrow. "Then why don't you believe in what it wants for you?" Yongsun didn't answer. She retreated to the window and watched rain drip down the glass like tears too proud to fall fast. She hadn't told him about her past, not yet. Not about her mother, who disappeared into the sea during Yongsun's 6th year. Not about the boy she'd loved in university, who wrote her poems until the war called him away, and who returned changed, hollowed, distant, wearing another woman's ring. Not about how the day she built the school, she wrote their names in the dream shelf and the ink never glowed. Just once tried to leave. He stepped out into the street to clear his mind, to convince herself he was foolish to fall for a ghost of a girl wrapped in riddles. But the world outside bent strangely. The streets twisted like calligraphy. Signs changed languages, and every road led back to the bookstore. He tried 3 times, 5 and 7, and every time he returned to the same threshold. Yongsun never spoke of it, but she knew, because the bookstore wasn't done with him, and neither was she. The first time, Jess wrote her name in the dream shelf. Yongsun The page glowed with heat, but this time he added something. Will she ever let herself be found? That night, the two of them fell asleep beneath the skylight, surrounded by open books and melted candle wax, and together they dreamed. In the dream, they stood in a vast garden where stories grew like vines. They wandered paths of ink and stars. They opened doors marked with their names. In one room, they were old and laughing at the seaside house. In another, there were musicians. She is the song and he is the instrument. In one, they held a child who had called them both names at once. And then came a blank room, white and empty. Whose future is this? Jess whispered. Yongsun stared at the desk in the center. A quill, an open book. Yours, she said. He hesitated and offered her the pen. Only if we write it together. She cried when she woke. The kind of crying that comes not of pain, but from the thaw of hope long buried. When Jess left, he didn't leave a note because she knew she had to choose. For days, the bookstore waited with her quiet, dustier, even the book stopped whispering. Then one afternoon, a wind lifted a single page into her lap. It was the dream sketch of a garden, and the music box began to play. And the song was her lullaby, the one her mother used to sing on stormy nights. Outside, the wind had changed. It had rained softly the night before, the kind of rain that felt more like memory than weather, leaving the city dressed in the glistening hush of the morning. The pale fog rolled over the stone paths, brushing against the cobbled streets like a tired lover returning to say goodbye. The lamplight clung to the mist, golden and slow as if reluctant to let go of the night. Inside the bookstore it was still dark, except for the faint glow of the dream shelf. The bookshelves stood taller today, more shadowed. The silence felt sacred, almost brittle. The phonograph didn't play, the candles had burned too low. Jess stood at the doorway, hand resting on the iron handle that had once refused to open for anyone but her. He turned toward Yongsun, his voice quiet and clean, like a cup of still water. Come with me, he said. She didn't answer at first. Her back was to him, standing near the poetry section where a book by Neruda had fallen open to a page about invisible lovers. This place needs me, she said, barely above breath. Jess nodded. Maybe it always will, but you don't have to be alone to help others find each other. Yongsun looked up, watching a shaft of light filter through the stained glass skylight. It struck the dust motes mid-air, painting galaxies in motion. She had lived within these constellations for so long, knew their patterns, the rhythm of the bookstore's breathing, the secret murmurs of books written by heartbreak. She turned slowly, eyes unreadable. If I leave, it might disappear. I know, he said, but love isn't something you leave behind. You carry it, you pass it on. Jess said. Outside the window, the wisteria vines stared. The blossoms were full now, dripping in lavender and frost. And spring was coming to an end. Time was shifting its weight again. Jess stepped closer. He reached into his coat pocket and unfolded a small paper boat, no larger than a palm, made from a page of a book he had never dared to finish. It was faded and fragile, but the ink shimmered faintly. Every chapter has to end, he whispered, so we can write another. Yongsun stared at the boat, at his hands, at her own reflection in the bookstore's wide glass window. A woman made of stories, hesitation, and stardust. She didn't move. So Jess kept speaking, not pleading, just offering. We'll go where books are needed, when songs aren't finished. We'll set up in gardens, alleyways, train cars. You'll teach and I'll listen. We'll find new names, new dream shelves. His voice got softer now, almost afraid. And I'll love you, Mayong. Not like the student, not like a story, but like the sky loves the earth. Always near, always different, and always watching. Yongsun closed her eyes. She could still feel the echo of her mother's hand brushing her hair before the tide carried her away. She still remembered the boy she once loved, leaving with a promise and returning with a stranger's eyes. But Jess wasn't a promise, it was a presence. And when he touched her hand, not pulling, not pushing, but just offering, like I've said, she felt the entire bookstore breathe out. A door clicked, a shelf sighed, and the music box on her desk began to play. A quiet melody she didn't recognize but somehow knew. It was the song her mother used to hum, and yet it sounded like the sea. It sounded like plum blossoms, like future lullabies, like beginnings. Yongsun opened her eyes and said, "Okay." Just that, but it was enough, and they traveled after that. Town to town, festival to forest. They opened up pop-up bookshelves in quiet alleys, helped strangers find each other through poetry, letters, and laughter. They carried the bookstore's magic in their pockets. The phonograph came with them. It only played when Jess smiled. Sometimes the music box would hum different tunes for different moments. And in every inn, in every train, every borrowed rooftop, Jess kept a journal. The final page always said, "She is not the mystery, she is the answer." And the bookstore never returned to that old corner. But when the wind is right and the longing is sharp enough, sometimes people say they find a door hidden between buildings, and when they enter, there's always a woman writing names in the air with a feathered brush. And beside her stands a man who believes love is a book best written together. If you find it, you'll know the bell won't ring, but your heart will. Years passed, not like the sand through the fingers, but like the ink sinking into a page. The world changed, as it always does. The wisteria that once guarded the door of a magical bookstore bloomed elsewhere now, high on a coastal hill, beside a small wooden building that smelled like cinnamon, seawind, and long-kept promises. There was no bell above the door, no flickering lantern, and no sigh. Only a painted symbol carved by hand into a beam above the threshold, the sun and moon entwined. Inside, the books lived not by genre, but by feeling. One shelf was labeled "Stories that begin with rain," another for those who almost said it, another still held breath and released. No 2 days were the same here. Sometimes the store was filled with music, a soft guitar riff, an old ballad, a jazz lullaby from a crackling phonograph. Sometimes it was filled with children tracing starlight with their fingers. Sometimes it was just the two of them. Mayong sat at the counter most days, a mug of tea steaming beside her. She didn't teach anymore, at least not formally, but people still came. People who don't know why they walked into a shop with no name. Jess wrote in the mornings. He had begun tuning and turning her travels into books, short stories, novellas, love letters wrapped in fiction, all under pseudonyms, all truth wrapped in stardust. Some stories were his, some were hers, but the best ones, the ones that made people cry in the reading nook by the window, were the ones they wrote together. A section of the shop was dedicated to blank books. They still called it the dream shelf. Only now couples filled it with what they had found, not what they were looking for. There was no magic left in the ink, but there didn't needed to be. One evening, long after the last visitor left, Jess sat beside Yongsun on the couch beneath the window. They had grown into each other like vines, different but inseparable. His arms curled around her waist, her head rested on his shoulder. Outside, the moon was low and golden. Inside, the music box played a slow, familiar tune, not because someone had wound it, but because someone had loved deeply enough to make it sing. Yongsun whispered, "Do you miss it?" "The bookstore?" he asked. She nodded. He looked around her little shop, and the bookshelves filled with stories that they could have written, at the walls that hummed with laughter and light and her. "No," he said, "we brought the bookstore with us." And outside, where the sea met the sky, a single page floated up into the wind, blank and waiting, as all best stories do. Each day, I write and create for my beloved Yongsun. The sun who lights up my every verse, every tale, every quiet thought I dare to share. If her warmth reached you through these words, please like, share, and subscribe. Let's keep stories that shine.